Well, hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us on this LinkedIn Live on tax day of all days. I didn't necessarily plan that, but here we are. Hopefully, none of you are scrambling to get your taxes in. But thank you for joining us for this Detroit Business Owner Training Transition session, where we'll talk a little bit about a stewardship-focused exit, what that is, and what that can look like that honors what you've built. My name is Hannah Sandmeyer, and I'm the founder of Up and Over Advisors and host of the podcast Ethical Exits. Our work is focused on helping folks navigate M&A for long-term stakeholder outcomes. And we principally work with buyers designing acquisition strategies focused on the long-term health of a business, not just short-term outcomes. And before launching this firm, I worked in high-volume M&A environments for private acquirers and saw firsthand how differently transitions can unfold depending on the structure and the incentives of these deals. And what became clear to me is this, that ownership transitions are not just financial events, even though we do tend to focus on them as a multiple or an exit value. They are human events. And in a city like Detroit, where businesses are deeply rooted in neighborhoods and families, how these transitions happen absolutely matters. So that's why we're hosting this conversation, not to push one path, not to sell you anything, just to widen the lens of what M&A can look like if you're starting to think about what that exit strategy might look like for you. And before we get rolling, I just want to acknowledge Carrie. Carrie is here. Say hello, everybody. Carrie.
Sorry, button. Hello, happy to be here.
Carrie's on my team here at Up and Over Advisors. She's working, actively doing a lot of work in Detroit, working with owners who are looking to perhaps exit or sell their businesses in the next years, or maybe even most imminently. Carrie will be here. She'll also be monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions, concerns, or things you want to raise, please put them in the chat, and Carrie will monitor that. I also wanted to quickly acknowledge and thank our partner and sponsor for this session, People First Economy. If you're not familiar with People First Economy, I definitely encourage you to look up those folks. They're doing some really great work in Detroit and in the state. They build tools and support networks working towards a stakeholder economy where people and environmental well-being are essential. So thank you so much for your support, Carlos and the team over there. I really appreciate that, and are so grateful that we can host this conversation with you. Okay, so getting into what this session is and what it isn't, I want to frame this quite clearly. This is an overview of your options, and I will do my best. It's an ongoing effort to speak about these things in as plain spoken terms as possible, and to be able to look at the trade-offs. So this will be a clear, if brief, overview of your options, a plain spoken explanation of the trade-offs, and a starting point perhaps for clarity, or getting you to think about maybe the options that you have and maybe what the next steps are. This is not about giving you some sort of evaluation process or a pressure to sell or a funnel disguised as education. I certainly do not like that when people tell me this is an educational session and they try to sell me. So I'm definitely not going to do that today. But if you leave today with better questions and maybe some initial direction, that's absolutely the win. Okay. So the ownership transition wave is happening. If you may have heard the term great ownership transition, great wealth transfer, silver tsunami. There's many terms that are being used for it now. But within the next 10 years, it is estimated that over 6 million businesses across the United States are expected to change hands due to, just frankly, the age of the owner who holds them. So most small businesses in this grouping are owned by founders that are over the age of 55, and this will certainly happen whether we're planning for it or not. The real question, and what we hope to guide you in, is whether you approach it intentionally or reactively. That's where the real power is, and what we're hoping to shift today. And Detroit is simply just built differently. It's Detroit businesses are absolutely not disposable. They have been built through cycles, not booms. They have deep ties to employees and neighborhoods. And owners like yourself have stayed when it's hard. You love your city, you love your local economy, and you have really made Detroit what it is. So before we talk about these transitions, it's worth grounding in just how important small businesses are to the Michigan economy. It might be something that you feel, but certainly the data supports that as well. So small businesses, and I think this is loosely defined as businesses that are doing less than 2 million in annual revenue, which is still a lot of money in my mind. But that's what the standard definition of what a small business is. If you look at firms like McKinsey, and they make up 99.6% of firms in Detroit and provide 47.9% of the jobs in the state. In the greater Detroit area alone, this transition wave will touch more than 41,000 businesses and more than 521,000 employees, representing about $115 billion in revenue. So when we talk about ownership transitions, we're certainly not talking about them as a niche issue in Detroit. We're talking about the future of the local economy. And the harsh truth really is, if we're not very good at transitioning small businesses, this is really where there's been a lot of failure in market. So it's really up to us, all of us, to get better at this. And per McKinsey, there was over 500,000 businesses that transitioned in 2022. 90 across the United States, not just in Detroit, but 92.8% of those businesses just closed their doors. That is catastrophic failure. I don't think that we could absolutely grade that with nothing less than an F, even worse than an F if that exists. That is market failure. We must do much better than that. Move the needle demonstratively over the next few years if we are to preserve what makes cities like Detroit. So, why do so few businesses sell? Historically, statistically, folks say 8 out of 10 companies do not sell. The McKinsey number I gave you was actually a little bit higher than that. Most owners don't fail to exit, they just run out of good options. And the reasons typically are that owners wait too long, or there's no clear path for them to identify the right buyer. They simply think that no one will come or no one will want the business. There's also that really heavy emotional weight of letting go, which is legit real. And it's not something to be discounted. The process also feels opaque and intimidating. Carrie talks about this a lot, and I think it's really true. And I'm sure that you've felt this maybe in your bones as well. We have built tremendous systems around starting a business, building a business, even scaling a business. We have not developed a lot of pathways or understanding around how to sell a business, and that is certainly having outsized impact. Valuation expectations are also tied to past performance, when really what a buyer is buying is the future, and that can create a lot of disconnect. And frankly, folks are just not prepared financially or operationally to step away. So it's usually not one dramatic event. Certainly that happens too. People get sick as they get older. Things happen, but it is somewhere in the range, typically, of one of these things, or maybe multiple of these things, and that causes real friction for owners. And there's no single definition of a good exit. I want to be clear on that, but not all exits are also created equal. So some certainly optimize for speed, some will certainly optimize for price, some optimize for stewardship and continuity, local continuity, community anchoring. Each path has their trade-offs for sure. And none of them are binary. Nothing is binary. You can get a mix of all of these things in a deal. That's certainly possible. And the key is just being honest with yourself about which lens that you're using and what exit or what outcomes that you are prioritizing for yourself. There's no right or wrong answer here, but it's good to get clear on that. So, what happens after the papers are signed? This is the part that doesn't show up in headlines. But after all the documents are signed, who gets to keep their job? Who makes decisions? Does culture shift? Does the business stay rooted here in Detroit? We know that's a big priority for the recently elected mayor, who we certainly support and will be coming to Detroit next month for an event with the mayor's office. But block by block vitality, keeping the businesses rooted in Detroit, not only recruiting new dollars to Detroit, but keeping the dollars that are in Detroit for the long term. So the purchase agreement is what happens on day one, but the consequences of how these deals are structured and who the buyer is and how these transactions happen certainly are long term, not just for you, but for every stakeholder that you impact with your business. And the fact of the matter is that you've built more than a business. You've built something that people rely on. The employees, of course, rely on the stability. The customers trust the consistency and product and quality that you provided over the years. And your name is tied to this. Years of judgment are baked into the operation. You've sacrificed a lot. Not only you, but your family, the folks in your life have sacrificed for this business, and that is. I just want to give space for this. That's why these transitions, of course, feel heavy. It's not just an asset for many of you. It's certainly an identity, and the loss of that or the fear of losing that is can be really hard for people to work through. There are the good news is there are a lot of different transition pathways, and there are more than most people realize. I think a lot of folks think, and it's just certainly unfortunate, that their only path out is just close the doors, just not open one day, to plan that exit, or to sell to a financial buyer, to sell to private equity, for instance. That is not the case. You can certainly sell to a strategic buyer. A strategic buyer usually means that another operating company in your industry will often can integrate you into their platform. So you can think of these folks as maybe your competitors in space. You know how hard it is to gain market share, to grow organically year after year. It becomes quite interesting for a competitor to buy you and to add the value that you've created into their customer base, or to use for your business for expansion. So that certainly it can happen. You can also explore employee ownership. There are a lot of different employee ownership models. We actually have an episode on ethical exits that where I interviewed Stacy Smith from Project Equity, where she kind of runs through those different options, all the different options that you have, what size of company they are appropriate for. That's certainly a good episode to lean into. Carrie, maybe you can put that link in the chat if you have time, or we can send that in follow up if you would like to take a look at that one. But that's a good one. You can also bring in a partner and stay involved. It doesn't have to be a hot exit. That certainly can be part of the strategy. You can also plan an internal succession, or what is defined or labeled as a management buyout. So if you have someone on your team that is certainly in a good position and can take over the business, that certainly can be an option. Of course, that can be someone in your family as well. I should share that. Of course, that's an obvious one. It might be maybe the first place that you turn if it's been a family-run business, or there's opportunity to partner with someone in your family for the future of the business. You can also sell to that financial buyer. So a financial buyer usually means an investment group, and they're buying your business for a return on capital. Those transactions can happen fast. So if you're looking for speed, that might be a good fit for you, and that's certainly available in market. They may keep your leadership in place, or they may integrate you differently depending on their strategy. So that's one thing to note. An independent buyer is a really interesting option. Sometimes this can be what's referred to as an ETA buyer. ETA is entrepreneurship through acquisition. So this is often an individual operator looking to step into ownership and run one business long term, and oftentimes they'll be local. So if you think about local professionals who have maybe been working, had a long career, and they're looking to step in ownership. That might be someone in your community, or it can be someone maybe who just got their MBA and is looking to step into ownership, and they don't want to have to start something. They recognize that what you've built is an amazing business, and they want to take it over from you. These folks would typically buy one company to operate. They're not building a portfolio. Sometimes that happens, but typically that's what you see. So they're really looking to own one business, and they're looking to own it long term. The point of sharing these options is not to opine about which one is best. The point is that you have options, and that can really help to really reduce some of that stress and pressure if you just start to explore which one of those options might be a good fit, and it might be some sort of a combination of these things. So, what does stewardship mean? Stewardship for us and how we think about it isn't about labels, it's about outcomes. So, thinking about the long term health of the business, a thoughtful ownership handoff, respect for employees and customers, it's really giving time for the transition, not just the transaction. It's thinking about what happens after I step away. Am I leaving the business and the impact that I've been having on this community? Am I living in a position for it to survive and maybe even thrive after I exit out? What stewardship is not, it certainly doesn't mean giving your business away or ignoring fair value or charity. I have had the absolute pleasure of working with a lot of folks who have chosen to sell their business to their employees, if that's an option, through one of the various vehicles. And that doesn't mean that they don't get fair value for what they've built. Rather, it's the opposite. They do get fair value for what they've built. They just have a beautiful option to pass it down to all the folks who have helped them build it along the way. It is not charity, as my friend Gina Schaefer likes to say. She wasn't Mother Teresa. Nor is it a one size fits all solution. So you can care, absolutely, you can care, and you should care about price and care about people and legacy at the same time. So when you're thinking about the purchase price or the structure of your deal, purchase price gets a lot of attention, or the multiple or the valuation of what you're going to get for your business. But the reality is the structure really is what matters, because that determines the live reality of what happens next outside of that dollar amounts. So there are a lot of different ways that deals are structured. I'm going to talk about these just very quickly, but there we will be in. We'll share that at the end of this presentation about what that will look like, but we'll be going into more detail on each one of these options. But there are different deal structures like earnouts, and earnouts and seller financing. They tie part of your payment to future performance. So for example, if you might receive additional payments if the business hits certain revenue or profit targets over the next few years, and that shifts some of the risk forward. Seller financing means you receive part of the purchase price over time instead of at all of it at closing. You're essentially lending the buyer part of the money that they're using to buy your business. Typically, that comes from cash flow that the business is throwing off. Carrie and I talked about this in depth on the most recent episode of Ethical Exits. That's another good one to maybe tune into. And when you offer those options, it can certainly expand your buyer pool, but it does keep you financially tied to the business for a period of time. If you think about selling to a local operator, or maybe selling your business to someone who already is in your business, these can be really interesting options. It can make it viable for them to step in if you're helping out a little bit on the financial risk of that decision. And then decision-making protections like board seats, veto rights over major changes, or agreements about keeping the company local for a period of time, that can come into deal structure. Also, retention agreements. So the point is that two offers with the same number can produce completely different futures. And that's why the terms matter. So not just the top dollar amount, but how are we doing this? How is it structured? What does this look like? What does decision-making power look like in my company moving forward? And what are the promises being made? Of course, lots of things that are said, if they don't end up in the contract, that can come back. But certainly getting clear on what these things are that matter to you, and trying to get as much of that and nailed down to the deal structure. We're thinking about those things in addition to the ultimate purchase price is certainly the point. So when should you start thinking about this? Earlier than you think. Ideally 2 to 5 years before transition, because you want to get your books clean, but you also want to reduce founder dependency in the most critical areas of your business. So a leadership bench absolutely matters. So thinking about where the business is dependent on you, or where revenue is concentrated, are your financials clean and predictable? This clarity will reduce pressure, and pressure is what creates outcomes owners later regret. So getting ahead of this as soon as you can, connecting with advisors, getting people that you can talk to that can help you start to think about some of these things really matters. The last thing you want to do is leave this to the last minute. That's where I think largely most businesses close, because they kind of keep putting this off. But the sooner that you can get ahead of these, the better position you'll be in. So four questions to ask yourself, if you stepped away, let's say in 24 months, and certainly before you ask maybe and start exploring what's my business worth, which I know is enticing, right? To think about that financial number, but start with these. So if I stepped away in 24 months, what breaks? Maybe you try that. Maybe you go away for 2 weeks. Don't answer your email. Don't answer your phone. See what happens. See what breaks. That will provide a nice breadcrumb trail for you. Also, what matters most or more, price, people, or preservation? What are you really seeking? Because that'll help you identify the type of buyer that you might be interested in pursuing, or the conversations you might be interested in pursuing with maybe your employees or people on staff, or maybe your family. What do you really prioritize there? And then who can you trust to carry this forward? And the other last thing is, will I wait to be found by buyers, or will I intentionally seek alignment? And there's a lot of different pathways to go down, if depending on where you are on these things. But these are the starts, just kind of like the fruit of starting to think about what this could look like, and giving yourself a longer runway. I know you're busy, you got a lot going on, but if this is in your near future, getting a head start on these areas and starting to think through some of these questions might be really helpful for you. Okay, so I want to leave some time for questions, and we're just almost at the end. But if you're curious about your options, we do host educational conversations for owners. We connect people with aligned buyers and advisors. We're absolutely happy to answer any questions that you might have privately. And then we're also going to be, as I mentioned, kind of in the middle, we're going to be in Detroit at the end of the month. So Carrie, do you want to share a little bit more about this event?
Yeah, we are really hoping that this evening provides a space for people to just come and ask questions at whatever stage you're at. So if you're at the stage of, I have no idea what it means to sell my business, then we want to talk to you. And if you're at the stage of, I have a valuation and I'm ready to go to market, we still want to talk to you. So really any stage would be fantastic. And we want to provide a space with some food and drinks and opportunity to connect with people who also might be in the same boat as you. Because I find personally as an entrepreneur that talking to other entrepreneurs is one of the only sanity making opportunities that I have. So, come and put yourself in a room with other people who are having the same potentially problems or thought processes or considerations. And not only will we be there to serve as a resource, but having each other as a resource. So we're really hoping to create a space where people feel comfortable to come and ask questions and be themselves.
Excellent. Yeah, so the majority of capital will be in the room. Some entrepreneurs that are seeking acquisition opportunities will also be in the room. Some local Detroiters who are looking to maybe take on that baton will be in the room, and also our friends from the Raw Space, of course, and the 6 Mile Business Network will be on hand. So we're really looking forward to that. Hope you can attend if you're available and you have the time. The QR code there is if you want to RSVP for that. And yeah, I mean, that's what we had for you today. Again, I want to thank our partners at the People First Economy and Carlos over there. I put his information on screen if you want to connect with him and maybe some of the resources that they're putting together. Also, my contact information. Happy to take any calls or to speak with you further. Certainly, Carrie's also available as well. But with that, I'll open up to questions. Carrie.
I think the chat is having some issues, so I'm just going to read the
Oh,
questions rather
oh.
than, just answer from the chat. But we have a question about seller financing, which was one of the things that you mentioned. And I'm curious, the question is just for a little more information about what seller financing means and who is the financer? Like, what does that look like?
Good question. Yeah, it's a really powerful tool, actually. It can be, and it tends to be used more in deals that are involved maybe that strategic or independent buyer, or maybe a local buyer, or maybe as I mentioned, maybe someone in the company, a manager maybe who wants to buy the business, or even for the employees that are looking to perhaps step up and buy the business. So what this means is effectively, let's run through a simple scenario. Carrie, you want to do that? Okay, let's say Carrie's business is valued at $1 million. I don't have $1 million, but I want to put down some money. So let's say excuse me, I go out and I get an SBA loan for, let's say it's for $500,000. So I pay for half of the business in cash, right, at close. And then Carrie, because she cares about me, she thinks that I'm the right fit for the business. She wants to sell to me. She uses the deal structure we put in place because I'm certainly interested in local continuity. I want to retain the jobs of the people that Carrie has working for her. I'm also very curious in extending and expanding her mission. Maybe also securing the certifications. Carrie is a certified B Corp business, let's say, or 1% for the planet business, or net neutral. I want to maintain those certifications. So Carrie feels really good about the type of buyer I am. She understands, like, shoot, okay, you can't come up with all the cash. Well, for that other half, and this is an aggressive scenario. Maybe it's not as big, but just for simple demonstration. So the other half of $500,000, Carrie and I have agreed that she's going to finance. So Carrie is going to finance or allow me to borrow that money from her over a payment period, let's say, of 10 years. Again, this is an excessive model, but I just want to use this for easy math. So $50,000 for the next 10 years is what I will owe Carrie on an annual basis. And I'm going to pull that $50,000 from cash flow from the business, right? So I don't have to go out and get any more money. I can get a good loan at a good rate. I can step in. I can give Carrie that peace of mind, and I'm going to pay her in the arrangement where I will pay her the $50,000 for the period of 10 years from cash from the business.
Awesome. That answered the question.
Great.
Fantastic. That's all the questions we have, and that's cool because we're at time.
Perfect timing. Okay. Well, amazing. Well, thank you so much for everybody for attending. We really like to do these events. I think they're really fun and cool. And M&A doesn't have to be intimidating. We just have to kind of know what's in front of us. So hopefully this gave you a good understanding of what those options are and what the phases of this transaction can look like, and some things to think about. And if you want to explore further with us at the end of the month, we'd love to see you in Detroit.
Thank you all.